So what does Corvette mean to me? Well, Corvette means to me, I'm just an avid car nut. Since the day I was born, I think I wanted to be in a car. And I used to come to work with my dad when I was a kid. And while on Saturdays and Sundays he'd be in here working, I'd be out in the hall playing with plastic cars. And I was playing with a ’63 Corvette. Since I was a little kid, I've been playing with Corvettes. And I'm now a big kid, and I'm still playing with Corvettes. It's something that once you fall in love with one, and you'll never lose the passion for them. My dad bought his first Corvette for the Hickman Motors collection back in 1979, and it was a '58 Corvette. And he bought it from a friend of his who was a dealer in Ontario, Brian Roundtree. It was Roundtree Motors, and I remember going up and visiting them one summer on vacation, and Mr. Roundtree had a bunch of old Corvettes in his garage at his summer home. And I think that's probably where my dad saw the car and made a deal, and he bought two '58 Corvettes and a '54, I think it was. My uncle bought the '54 and the '58, and my dad kept the other '58 for himself. And we've had that car since 1979. So it's been part of our family, and it's been a car that cherished. We've restored it over the years. It was originally a light blue car, and then when my dad got it, our guys decided that they painted dark blue with white in the center coves, and they did some stuff to it, but sort of took away from the originality of the car. Then in the late '80s, I said to my dad that we shouldn't, the car needs to be done, and it wasn't, the quality of restoration wasn't that good at the time, and I begged him to allow me to oversee it, and he said no problem, go to it. So we started working on the car and stripped it right down to its bare fiberglass again, and rebuilt a bunch of components on it, and painted it to what it is today, and that's the original light blue color. The '58 that we have is a car that is on the upper scale of the performance metrics at the time. So the car has a 283 cubic inch engine, which is the only engine that was available at the time, but the horsepower ratings went from 230 right up to 270 horsepower. This car is a 245 horsepower car, and it has dual carburetors, so actually two 4-barrels on it. So it's pretty cool. When you step on your accelerator, the pedal goes down so far and opens up the first carburetor and drives the car, and then when you push further, you can feel some resistance in the pedal, and then the second carburetor opens up and the car makes a big roar, and it's 245 horsepower moving down the road. It's pretty quick in its day. In comparison today, most regular cars on the street will probably take it. But in 1958, 245 horsepower out of a car like that was pretty impressive. But the car has no power steering, it has no power brakes, so it's fairly difficult to drive. It's a 4-speed standard shift with a very long clutch on it. There's not a lot of room in it. I think my dad also liked them in the fact that, in '79, he bought this '58 Corvette, but I remember my dad was always a very busy man and spent a lot of time at work and spent his weekends with us, but he was always up early and gone to work early and home late during the week, so we didn't get to see him a lot. And occasionally he'd drive me to school, but not very often. But I have a vivid memory that he took me to school in a '72 Corvette, and it was gold. And I don't remember the options were, but I think it was a big block car, so it was a 454. And I remember him dropping me off, and I'm standing at McDonald Drive Elementary School, and I'm about to go in the building, and when he pulled out onto the main road on McDonald, on the what's now the Parkway, he floored it and burned rubber all up the road. And it was one of the most amazing things I'd ever seen. And in 1972 I was 5 years old, so I couldn't wait to be able to do the same thing. So the C8 Corvette is obviously the first mid-engine Corvette produced, and been long awaited for by the public. And the car is absolutely phenomenal. Driveline currently is an LT2. It's a V8. Available up to 495 horsepower if you pick the Z51 package, and the Z51 package is a suspension performance package which deals with shocks and brakes and ride and suspension. The car right now, being a mid-engine, every 2020 Corvette is in an automatic transmission, 8-speed transmission only. There are no more standard shifts. Our 58 Corvette is a 4-speed standard shift. This car has double the gears, so we're an 8-speed automatic. But what's really cool about this transmission, what's impressed me the most about this transmission in this car, it's called a dual clutch system. So it's actually got 2 gear sets in the vehicle, and it's got even gear sets on one side and it's got the odd gear sets on the other side. And when you're shifting gears in a regular car, between shifting gears you're losing RPM, which the car actually slows down. Every time you go to shift gear in an automatic or a standard shift vehicle, by the time you shift a manual shift, you come off your RPMs, the car actually slows down for whatever milliseconds it might be before you get into the next gear and go. The new dual clutch system actually has, if you're shifting from 3rd to 4th through the electronic system, it will shift in milliseconds. There's not a human being can shift as fast as this car can possibly shift, and keeps the RPM. So the torque curve of the car stays consistent. And what's really ironic about that, and until I understood how the transmission and the engine made it together, in a C7 Corvette and every Corvette before that, you have your engine, your transmission, a drive shaft, and a rear end. And then the last cars, we actually had the engine, what they call the torque tube, and then the transmission and the gear, or the rear end, sort of linked in the back of the car. But you lose a lot of horsepower when you have to go through drive shafts and side axles. With the current car, all that's gone. So the engine's behind the driver, and it's connected right to the transmission, to the rear transaxle, to the wheels. So you eliminate a whole bunch of stuff there. We currently have a Z06 2019 in stock. It's 650 horsepower, 650 foot-pounds of torque. And this current car, the C8 that's out today, which is 495 horsepower, is actually faster than a car with 650 horsepower, which is pretty impressive. It's about design, it's about downforce, it's about all this engine and transmission connection that makes this car so quick. But it will do 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. And it is truly amazing how when I drive the car, I can't say, the older Corvettes had a lot of, like a Z06 had a lot of brute horsepower and felt strong, or very powerful and fast. I describe the C8 as quick. It's amazing. You step on the accelerator and it's quick, and how quickly it shifts between gears. It just snaps in. It's like, totally amazes me on how the car does. And everybody's asked me, what's it like to drive a Newfoundland, drive on the roads around here where our roads are so terrible? If you put it in the right touring, there's a touring mode, there's a sport mode, and a track mode. If you put the car in touring mode, it's actually quite drivable. It's very smooth, it absorbs the bumps, there's not a lot of road noise in the car. Just amazing how it performs. So from a drivability perspective, depending on what you want, you can have a very soft, smooth ride, or you can put it into an aggressive track mode, and the car will shift in transmissions and hold RPMs and rev higher, and the suspension will be much tighter because it has this Z51 suspension package, and it's called magnetic ride control. So it adjusts to the road conditions. So if you're on a windy, turny road and the car knows that you're going through this, it'll tighten up the shocks so the suspension's better, the car will have less body roll and things like that. So it's pretty cool. Design and safety features, it's of course all current airbags, and it's a space frame design interior of the car. It's got traction control, stability controls. Visibility forward is amazing. Visibility, if you just want to use your own eyes, you've got to remember what was on the inside lane, or make sure you're using the technology in the car. Technology within the car, of course, has gone from the 58 with a few gauges and all analog to a totally 12-inch screen in front of the driver and a 7-inch infotainment system that record everything from G-forces in the cars to acceleration, to oil pressures, temperatures. It's had a long history. Corvette has been an icon of America, and let's call it North America, because it's equally as important in Canada as it was in the US, about being the iconic North American, Canadian sports car. When you look at all the years, every year has been amazing and an advancement in the car, but it's never made the old cars undesirable as well, because the old cars have always had their uniqueness, and they become attainable to everybody. I mean, there's Corvettes. Everybody can buy a Corvette, even though today's cars, you know, the MSRP starts at $70,000 and could be, depending on options, up to $117,000, $118,000. There's still lots of Corvettes that you can go out and buy. You can find one for $5,000 and start fixing it up yourself. So Corvettes, there have been so many of them that anybody can really get into the Corvette hobby and work your way up through the cars. And so many people love to look and stop and ask you about the car. That's what I enjoy. It's about, you know, hey, what is that? What year is it? Where'd you get that? Oh my God, it's beautiful. You know, and so many times you get to thank people for recognizing and stopping you just to say, what do you got there? What is it? Tell us all about your car. So telling people about the Corvettes is always most enjoyable to me. That's what's created the Corvette community. You know, there's many clubs around the world, and there's Rotary clubs and there's Kinsman clubs and all those types of things. Motorcycle Harley owners group called the Hog Group, and there's the Corvette Club. And you know, some sports car groups have clubs, but Corvette has always had a Corvette following and a Corvette club. And when you're driving a Corvette, just like a Jeep, if you're driving a Jeep, people driving the other Corvette or driving a Jeep will wave at you. There's not many, and motorcyclists the same, they'll wave at you. But if you're driving a Chevy Silverado pickup and another Chevy Silverado pickup passes you, chances are they're not going to wave at you like they are in a Corvette.